everybody. I'm Laurie Anderson. I get to ask a few things of these wonderful people. But you know what? I'm kind of a wreck. I scribbled a bunch of things on some papers. I've seen the film before, and I really loved it. I saw it last summer, and then I feel like I saw a completely different film. It was so incredibly emotional. And I was just mentioning that to you. I mean, I love both of those films that I saw. But I saw it's such an incredible unraveling, and that hadn't hit me the first time, because there was so many other things about music and silence and tunnels and fantastic, colorful things. Do you see a different film every time you see this?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the same. It affects me in the same way. You know, it's a funny thing. After you finish a film, that people want to be able to market it, and they say, well, let's pull scenes out. And you try to pull scenes, but the scenes in themselves don't really make any sense. There's no scenes that kind of have a beginning, a middle, and end. Very few of them in the film. So it's really about sort of how they're strung together, and so sometimes I was just saying, like I was saying to you, on Monica Lily, when we were cutting, we were alone. We were in Scotland for several months. There was nothing to do. Neither one of us drive on the left side, and so we cut 7 days a week, and we'd get to a point where we would finally be at a place where we could start to screen the film down, and we'd always turn to each other and say, "How did you feel today?" And
what were some of the answers?
Well, some of it, she'd say, "I didn't like her today. I really didn't like her today." I'd say, "Okay. Well, how did you feel the next day? How did you feel?" I really, I admired her courage. When she got up, or I was indifferent, or it really depended. And I think a lot of it depended on. Just like when you go to a play, or anything, have you eaten? What time of the day is it? What happened to you before you sit to watch something? What happens to you the night before? All those things that affect the way that we relate to audiovisual material.
Cate, if you had to pull a scene from it that, as he's saying, would be what it was about for you, could you do that? Like just one or two that are
It's so interesting because it's the experience of making it. I mean, obviously you do your homework and for many years on stage, and you would know this as you would know this too, Nina. You have a really strong sense of a third eye, so that you can be somehow semi-objective about what's going on, but you have to be subjective. And there's so many parts of the movie that I felt were pivotal to the story, but also to the characters' journeys that haven't actually ended up in the movie. And I said to Todd the first time I saw it, I went,
they were cut.
Yeah, they were cut.
Oh, but can you do one of those scenes for us?
Yes. But he said the most interesting thing is that he said, "Don't worry, they're homeopathically there." And I understood exactly what he meant, is that because the thing about Todd as a screenwriter and as a filmmaker is that you have such an impeccable sense of rhythm. And so, people talk about the killing your darlings of it all, but you thought this actually breaks the rhythm of the movie. We can't be in this contrapuntal thing here. It has to go. But it was really great for us to know those things, because that was part of the story that we signed on to tell. So it became backstory. So in answer to your question, there was a huge birthday party sequence where the character was turning 50. And I remember talking to people saying, it's really, she's about to turn 50, and they would sort of glaze over because it's mentioned, but it's not kind of central to people's understanding of it. But to me, that sort of biological change, that internal, it's so much about time. And in a way, like I'm rabbiting on, but maybe as it stands, I would say the prologue because the prologue, it's very top heavy in language, but in a way that interview contains everything.
Would you say the rhythm between like the two of you and some of the scenes that you did, was it really a kind of counter sort of thing? Like, because there's a lot of really unexpected ways that someone would just wait, for an extra, 2 beats or something, or was that more instinctive and emotional? Because it really did, when you said rhythm, I could see that in some of the ways that you're kind of moving back and forth between each other.
But for me it was interesting because I didn't exactly know everything the two had spoken about. So I had sometimes the feeling there is something going on with her until I found out she got something in her ear that gives her the beat of her walking, and then I thought, so she's in a speedy motion, So all of that, and amongst other things, I thought, oh, Sharon has to go, cool. She is the one who is the contrapunct to Lydia, to hold the balance to this woman who's right now, the moment we meet this couple, of course, she's a bit fleeting away, Sharon notices she's losing her. She has lost her probably before now and then and caught her back, but this time it seems a bit different. And so I wanted Sharon to be the one who holds the pace, although sometimes her heart is fluttering. So that was interesting also, why that happens to her. But it's true. It had something to do with different rhythms.
You're a great violinist, by the way.
Don't say it so threateningly.
Tell us how you got that style? Because, that was convincing.
When you practiced,
you practiced a lot, obviously.
She practiced a lot.
A lot.
No.
But it was very kind of diva-esque also. It was really concert mistress. It was really pretty cool.
Concert mistress.
Yeah. Was it fun to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I got asked for the 3rd time to portray a violinist. Every time I take this instrument again, and I'm with my wonderful teacher, Marie Kogge, I think, why didn't I learn it as a child? Because I love it so much. It's just something, you would know, of course. It's just, for me, it comes the closest to singing. Because I can't control it. I have to trust that I hit the right note. And then these 2 different movements of the, you work immensely to get it down, but it's, when you make it, it's like, oh, what is it? Oh God, it feels warm, the wood gets warm. So I'm just like, it's an incredible instrument, so I loved working on it.
I was interested in that comment about conducting the right and left hands of conductors. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because for violinists, I think they would say that the left hand is chops, like speed of blah, and the right is expression. But in your definition of conducting, you're saying the right hand is time and beating. But it seemed like your right hand was often like floating off this way and not so much, doing that. I don't know.
I think traditionally, the right hand marks time and the left hand is expressive.
Crescendos.
But it's so idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
And it's also the difference between conducting in performance and conducting in rehearsal is entirely different. And so it's about facial posture, it's about breath and breathing with the human instrument. So I think when you're trying to elicit something from your instrument, you'll do anything you can to get that sound out. So sometimes, both hands are dealing with, the cadence and not just the rhythm.
Mm-hmm. But maybe for the post, or the main image of the both arms flung back, was for me a woman breaking apart, and I just wanted to ask you, back to this this unraveling, which for me was the thing that was just like, I almost couldn't watch it the second time. It was so very intense. Can you talk about why you chose music for this, or was that what you were going for, a person breaking like that?
Well, I've been thinking about a character like this for many years. I think at a certain age, you meet a lot of different people.
That's saying
Right.
very mildly.
And so I haven't made a movie in quite a while, and at a certain point I thought maybe I'll write a novella, or I'll try to take a stab at writing a novel or something. And then the pandemic happened, and I had this opportunity, which was essentially the studio said they had this idea that they wanted to have a film vaguely about, like, it would have a conductor, and I had written a film about a conductor as an assignment, as a piece of employment years before. So I had done a little bit of study into it, but not much. But the main thing was it's a perfect kind of container to examine the pyramid of power. It's so clear, right? I mean, it's a pure pyramid. You have a podium and you have the orchestra, and it's right there. So it's very visual that way. And so the idea of being able to have this character in a position that's front house and back house, and to see what those sort of electrified lines are between power, and how power transmutes, and how there's somebody on the receiving end and on the sending end, and how that goes back and forth, and how it benefits different parties based on how power is fed. It is a fairly simple thing to play with within that kind of milieu. So that's really really it. I really didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't. No, I really didn't. I really had adapted. I hadn't written anything original since I got out of film school in 1995. So everything I'd done was an adaptation. So this is the first time where I just sat down and wrote, and it was a very, very different experience. It was very fast. It came very quickly. I was done with the script in 12 weeks.
That's incredible. Also, as a piece of like social engineering, to see all of the reactions of the orchestra to this, the whole situation, which is so deadly in many ways. I mean, the experiences I've had with orchestras, they all kind of came back to me watching this, is how incredibly hierarchical it is, and there's so much suffering. I mean, I remember as a kid studying music, a lot of that, my joy in music was kind of destroyed by the competitive nature of it. It's cutthroat, and I think you really got that so perfectly. I mean, it's quite polite, because all the blonde wood and all those beautiful concert halls, and everyone comes dressed up, and they don't see the, what's going on behind the scenes. And I think, Nina, your expressions were the ones that showed that in the most heartfelt way, when you're the only one who's kind of getting it of the whole orchestra, and it's that point when it's on your face. And so, how did that feel to be that kind of narrator in this? Because you were the knowing one in the whole group. Did you feel that when you're in what you were doing?
I don't think so.
Really?
No, I was really more involved in what's going on between them. But what I really learned is exactly that, because we were shooting the first 2 weeks. We were in Dresden and shot with the real orchestra, Dresden Philharmonics. And I think Cate couldn't get this experience that much, because she was on the pedestal, on her own, and had to get the respect from these musicians which were kind of cutthroat. Also, they were very with us and the most amazing collaborators, and you know, because they were excited, of course, like us. We were so excited to be working with the real deal, you know. But I was sitting in that. At a certain point, they forgot that I am somehow a foreigner in this thing, and then it starts, you know, about the other musicians, about the thing. But one beautiful moment was, because I will never forget this moment, Cate stood for the first time on this podest. And it was like, okay, now we're going to start. I was like shaking, I'm going to play this thing with the real musicians on the first chair. You know? And then she goes and she lifts her hand, and the sound, I mean, I still get goosebumps. It was this most beautiful sound. To sit in the middle of it was just crazy. And I said to them, oh my God, this is what you get to do every day? And then they were, oh yeah. That was crazy. So somehow I thought, maybe it was quite good that we were there. So it was for us an amazing experience. But I think, like you say, this world is so cutthroat. You feel every position is in danger. If you make a mistake, you're out. Someone else wants your seat and so on. But they started it all out of passion. And yeah, and that got, somehow they experienced, because we were so in awe of what they were doing.
It's true, at some point there's no ego whatsoever when you make a sound like that.
Yeah.
You know, but I did feel, just one last thing about that, you were the narrator of this film. By just that face that just goes, I see that, I see it all. And it only happened like 3 or 4 times, but you were like, oh, the only one who sees what's going on. So, but how did it feel being a conductor, you know, just with that kind of power? Was that a huge rush?
I was speaking to a woman I know, Simone Young, who is the intendant of both the Hamburg Opera and the Philharmonic Orchestra there, and she's a fellow Australian, and she's achieved so much in her life, and she's just taken over the Sydney Symphony. And she was saying, you still feel every time you stand up. I mean, I don't know what you do when you perform, but I know when I'm backstage, I'm terrified, and I have to do this trick where I say, this same energy that you feel, physical terror, is this very akin to excitement. And I do this flip. It's literally like I do that old-fashioned Looney Tunes switch where I say, I'm excited!
I'm really excited.
But it felt, I mean, as Nina said, and look, we were fortunate with just how generous the orchestra was, and they had to act, you know, and we had to be musicians, and so we were, all of us together were outside our comfort zone. And you realise that somewhere between the orchestra and the conductor, the music is made. But what I found really interesting, and I'd be interested to know from you, is that as a theatre actor, I am so acutely aware of the audience, and that the thing doesn't mean anything really until you get the audience in. But yet I got the sense that somehow with music, it's all about the sound, and that the audience can sometimes get in the way of that. Do you know what I mean?
And so also, as a conductor, you have your back to the audience,
well, yes,
which is completely strange.
And so, of course, the audience doesn't know half of what, because the majority of the conductor's work has already been done in the very small rehearsal space that they've got. But it just, in terms of what you're saying about it being hierarchical and almost, particularly in the big classical works existing in a rarefied space, is that it is sort of between you and the gods, not necessarily between you and the audience, primarily. Yeah, and that was a slight, even though I've always felt very at home on stage, except for moments like this when you have to talk like yourself and but it was a very, very different relationship to audience. And
I saw that mostly when you were backstage going, wow, wow, you know, talking to something else. The only time you talk to some other
getting rid of the
power, and otherwise you were very, you know, had your own engine going. But this was going, I don't know why I'm doing this, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
I think, and I don't know if you feel this, but the more one does, the more superstitions one has to sort of push aside. But it's also, in respect to what you know, Nina was saying before about, and what you were saying before about rhythm, is that I read somewhere that Simon Rattle had said that he always heard music. You probably always hear music in your head. You are music, but it's and so I thought, well, I'm going to have to put an earwig in my ear. So I had music or a beat or a rhythm or a chant or playing in my head all the time. So there's a sense that you're always distracted by, you know, the everyday sort of domestic machinations that we spend. They're a distraction from the thing that you're trying to connect to.
Breathtaking moments in the film when it just, mostly in cars. Why was it in cars where it just gets to absolute silence? I mean, you were going through tunnels and something, there was nothing there. Or you think they're all driving Teslas or something, because there was there were no motors in that world. There's only the tiny irritating sounds in your house that are like, you turn it into a kind of ghost. Haunted house, the little ticks and things you're always hearing and going, but outside was silent. And like it was really struck me that the sound design was amazing of this film.
Yeah.
Was that was were there any other places where you? I mean, I probably missed a bunch of other things where you cut to like real silence, but it was really so sharp.
Well, you know, it's a we worked very hard on the sound. In fact, part of the editing, most of the editing was about sound. So Mona, our editor, is just like one of the truly greatest living editors. Just absolutely. It's about, especially when it comes to rhythm. You know, where we were, there were only like, you know, sheep and birds. So as long as they were quiet, we'd go outside and we would shoot sound. We had microphones, and we would get stuff from the butcher and stuff from the market, and we would go out and we Foleyed the whole movie by ourselves.
In Scotland.
In Scotland, yeah. So,
what? Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, we, you know, by the time.
Like, what's an example of that? Like, what would you go out and get? Like,
well, I shouldn't talk about it. It's hard to get certain sounds. I'll tell you later, but just, you know, like a friend of mine is John Resch, and John Resch is sort of a famous Foley artist, and I've known him since I was in school back in '92, and he works for George Lucas now. And I would call him in Scotland and say, "What should I try?" And he would give us suggestions. Some of them would work, and some of them wouldn't work at all in terms of what we were going for. So we did a lot of experimentation with it. You know,
some big, weird, meaty sounds in there that you just couldn't understand where they came from. It was like,
yeah, you know, that's true.
Really hilariously colorful sounds.
Yeah, and Stephen Griffiths is our sound designer. So we would send him stuff, and we had back and forth. And he had a lot of fun because we had to kind of negotiate, because our process was remote, and so it was by necessity informal. You know, normally a lot of the times those things are very institutionalized. Like, okay, we have 3 days in the Foley pits and blah blah blah. It wasn't like that. You know, it was a conversation, and it was like a 4-month conversation between the 3 of us. So that was super exciting.
But the thing for me that's the most fills the brain is your voice, because it's there the entire time, and just kind of equivocating and just pontificating, and it's what an incredible repertoire to have. What was it like to do that? I mean, become so many characters. I mean, really, that's really quite a group that you created.
But it was all in the script. I mean, you didn't need to change a syllable of what was there. I mean, I'm very language focused, so, you know, you mine the script, and when I first started reading it, particularly that opening prologue, I thought, I've got to get a musical lexicon out because I really don't know half of the reference points. So it was a real education. But in the end, the audience, you don't need to know those things. It just, you need to know that she knows, you know, her knows her onions, and But I often wish, I mean, I love it when you can dispense with language altogether. I sort of would have been very, very happy to be a silent movie actress with Todd with a megaphone saying, "Move forward, wave your hand! Higher!" You know, but I would have been very, very happy.
Maybe next time.
But, you know, those moments, and one of my favourite things in the entire universe is when dancers leap off into the air, and just the moment before they start to descend, you know, and those moments that you can find with breath, you know, the moments before you speak, or before the moments of suspension, which we had many of them between the two of us. You know, it's the moment before a reaction is possible. They're the things I love, you know, and that only happens between actors. I mean, the dialogue was like, oh my God, how many pages do I have to say? You know, and
no, it's true. And this was another thing out in the edit, which I would just say, God, why did this guy write so many fucking words? why don't they shut up? It's true. It's true. You know, it's like it's a very talky. And the front of it is very, very talky.
But then it sort of it ebbs off, you know, and I think that's a really interesting rhythm in and of itself. But I mean, in answer to your question about so many, I mean, we're many different people with, you know, we're different people with every different person that we meet, and we show a different shade or a different colour. I mean, you're a different person with your mother than you are with the grocer, or, you know, with the other person who, you know, your vet, or, you know, who, you know, you have different relationships. And one relationship which I thought was really revelatory was Lydia's relationship with her daughter, and that was really bedrock. And I just thought it was a real opportunity to show who she really was, or her best self. And I tell you, she was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I mean, one of the most playful, special sprites I've ever met. Apart from my own 4 children, of course.
Oh, the families were great. Also, Nina, your mom was classic.
She's very informative on what Sharon is, isn't it? It was like, ooh.
The kid, it's in a room. It's in a room over there.
She got it in one take. That was literally one take. I don't think I ever made eye contact with her.
No, she had no interest in you at all.
No, I know.
There's some characters like in movies that they're on for like a 4 seconds, but you remember. She's one of them. I remember that face.
She's a great actress.
What a wonderful. It's hard to be that deadpan. It's also. I loved the beginning of the movie too, because it was just so nerdy and talky and like, this is what it's all about, and you're like, it was just hilarious that it was like so sure of itself, you know, in this way that you're like, oh, this is not going to go well. You know, it was so absolutely perfect, just down to the right water on the table, and you just see this conversation so many times in your life. It's just really funny to see you getting it so right on. It's really right on. This time, how many, you've seen it 150 times, you said maybe. Kate, how many times have you seen the film completed?
I saw it once very early, before it had sound mixed, and then I saw it in Venice like this.
Oh no, really? Oh, well, what did you make of it? Or you didn't see it? How did it sound? Really, you didn't look at it? That's in Venice?
No, because I think it's just I'm so aware of the audience. Mm-hmm. Like the first time I saw it, I saw it from a technical point of view. So I was watching it. I was watching it for story. I was watching it with a partial recollection of what had been filmed. It's a very strange, embarrassing experience the first time you see something that you're in. Like you're so grateful that no one is watching you, because you kind of relive the experience. You know, it's a very strange. Do you find that when you listen to recordings of things that
Yeah, I don't listen to it.
Well, exactly my point.
If somebody goes, let's play some of your old records, like, well, I leave the room.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's torture.
That's exactly.
I got it. Yeah.
So, yeah. Because there's nothing. I mean, at that point,
But you're missing a great film. It's so great. It's such a great film. And those of you, how many have seen this once before? I know a couple of people have seen it once. Yeah. I just am curious was it really different the second time for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have more answers, I feel like. Yeah.
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 I just, it was startling to me how heart-wrenching this screening was, and before it was a wonderful film, but I didn't see the central point of it. How could you miss that? Someone falling apart. It was like, I don't think I've seen a film that I touched me that way, of really watching somebody just utterly, shred. It was in still kind of good-natured ways. By the time you're at the end, you're still kind of going for it, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I read the screenplay, I found the end absolutely heartbreaking. I thought, this is a tragedy. And then, and the more I thought about it, I thought, and in the making of it, and once we got there, and with that extraordinary student orchestra, I just thought, this is a liberation. This is a profound act of humility that I am going to, I've got the flame and the passion and desire to create, and I'm starting again. And, when you crest a mountain, it doesn't have to be in a creative life, but, some sort of sense of personal achievement. In order, if you're truly, truly going to live your life in a rich way, once you get to the summit, you have to run downhill in order to try and mount another summit. And obviously, when we see her at the beginning of the film and their relationship and everything, they're just about to crest the summit. But you have to risk blowing it all apart, and so that there's a lot of things that are difficult to watch and unpalatable. Some people might find unforgivable, but I think there's kind of a nobility to that humility, that she shows right at the end to start again.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. Aside from also be very, very funny. But
the costumes. I mean, Venus costumes. She really pulled them out.
How many kids how many people are in that show?
Venus, we were in Berlin, and she said, Todd, you have these costumes at the end. Can we talk about the costumes? And I said, yeah. Let's talk about the costumes. She said, how many people are in the audience? I said, there's 1,000. No. Yeah, there's 1,000 people being. It's going to be this. I know the shot. I knew it when I wrote it, and I'm telling you, there's got to be 1,000 people. She said, okay, then we need to cut the budget other places. And she and her husband, they created 1,000 costumes, and it was when we walked in and saw that room for the first time. I mean, Cate and I looked at each other, so we were almost in tears. It was just, it was such a Herculean task, and it was so exquisitely done. I mean, it was really, really perfect. But yeah, it is funny. Yeah, it's very funny.
Is this the first time you wrote a film for somebody specifically?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
He will never ever do it again.
Will you ever do it again?
I don't, like I said before, I haven't written original material, so when you write literary material, you've already read the book, and when we read books, we imagine people, and they're not actors. And I think I've always found it probably more useful just to keep that feeling while you're adapting the material, and not get ahead of yourself, But in this case, Cate appeared. It was like, oh, okay, well, oh, that's who she is, and probably she appeared because who else is going to play this part, right? Who else could do this, And we had met. We had talked about doing a piece of work together. I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. And it never came to fruition. But we met in New York, and I could tell from being in dialogue with her that it would probably be a very exciting thing to collaborate with an artist like this, and I was right.
Well, also, maybe it's because of how much I loved the work you did in Manifesto, that it did seem so convincing. You as a conductor just seemed like you knew totally what you were doing. Did you have fun making Manifesto? It must have been like most fun ever.
I'm so glad you saw it. It was a multi-channel work with a friend of mine who's a moving picture artist in Berlin, and it was all from artist manifestos. I had such a ball, and that's where I met Bina, who did the costumes, and I used to do this thing with my sister when we were young, where she'd put me in front of the mirror and she'd dress me up, and then she'd go, "Okay, your name is Piggy Trucker," and then I would go, I'd become Piggy Trucker, and it felt a bit like doing that. It felt like sort of, and what I loved about it was that these artist manifestos were so absolute and singular in their and in their belief of their utter uniqueness, and that they were going to change the world. But when you put them into these various contexts, like one was set in a garbage dump, one character was homeless, one was a character was a choreographer, one was an art curator, and I would be saying these manifestos as if they were just making absolute sense, but of course it was nonsensical. When you put them all together, they all sound exactly the same. So they were asserting their difference, but yet when you hear them, it's almost like you didn't speak English once you heard them as a cacophony. They're all, our desire to assert our individuality has the same rhythm and the same cadence. And
they were definitely
so
broadsheet
fascinating.
kind of things. Yeah, but I thought you really brought them to life, because when you're making art, you kind of go, why am I even doing this? And they go, and so each manifesto was, what is art? And so art is fast, art is new, art is slow and syrupy, art is telling you what to do, art is just asking you what you should do. It was really, I felt like I woke up at the end of that. It was really like a big menu of what it could be, and each
kind of
character
listening to everything that you've ever written and played. That's how I feel about everything that you do.
Should we ask the audience if they have a question, because you're all about, does anyone want to pipe up? I know.